Hey everyone, Dockwell here, and today is the offlane tier list. Hopefully, this video isn't old or outdated by the time it comes out, but let's just jump into the first tier, which is actually S plus tier, which is unique for this video because I think this hero deserves its own tier, and that's Dawnbreaker. This hero is far and away the best hero in the offlane, but probably just the best hero of the patch overall, like of any position of any hero, because this hero was already getting picked in Pro Dota. This hero was already getting picked at high-level pubs before the last patch. It was kind of like right at the tail end of the patch, people realized this hero was good, and then it didn't get nerfed at all, and pretty much everything else that was good got nerfed. And now this hero is just far and away the best hero. It's just insane. It does literally everything you want it to do. The laning stage is great. You do a ton of damage, you're super tanky, you're hard to deal with. Level 1, 2, 3, you're maybe not the best, but you can still be pretty good, especially paired with the right support. And then later on into the game, you do insane amounts of damage. You have a crazy good save in your ultimate because you can play like a Spectre across the other side of the map and then counter initiate, which is great. You can gank with this as well. You don't even have to really be at the gank. The only thing you don't really do is you don't usually initiate, so you need someone on your team to initiate, or you can really just wait for the enemy to initiate onto your team and then use this. So that's why this hero is so good. And then you can also, just in team fights in general, and then you can farm really well with Celestial Hammer, with Starbreaker. This facet is amazing because basically with this level 20 talent, this -1 luminosity attacks required to get this crit, every time you are getting this crit, which heals and also does a lot of damage, your cooldowns are decreased, which means you're just like spamming these things a ton of times in fight. You can use these like 5 times in a single fight. It's absolutely absurd. And they do insane amounts of damage. Like, you don't even really have to buy that many damage items, maybe 1 or 2 damage items, and you just, you go for like S and Y, you go for Echo Saber, you might go for AC or even Deso at times. You maybe go 1 damage item and the hero just, it feels like when you swing Starbreaker around, especially with the Ag Shard where you have the BKB and you can control it, you will literally like one-shot supports. It's absurd. This hero is absolutely ridiculous. Like I said, it's farmed so quickly, amazing laning stage, great counter initiation, great team fight, spamming spells in fights, easy to farm with, can play like a Spectre across the map and be everywhere on the map whenever you need it. It's just honestly the best hero, and it feels so easy to play too. It's really not complicated at all. Like, it's really not. These spells are straightforward. They're easy. They're obvious. You understand what you need to do. You have mobility. It's very easy, honestly. I don't know what else to say about this hero. It's just really, really good right now. And it's fun to play, honestly. It's a very fun hero to play. So if you're playing offlane, just spam Dawnbreaker. It's very good right now. Then I have S tier because honestly, if you look at the win rate and pick rate, these heroes are pretty close to Dawnbreaker. They're just not at that level, but they do deserve to be in a tier themselves. So we have Night Stalker here, and this hero, surprisingly enough, I wasn't expecting this when I was looking at the stats, but this hero is good. I knew it was good, but it actually is really, really good right now. It's even being played as a mid, sort of. I would say it's not the best mid. I actually didn't include it on the mid tier list. It's just more of an offlaner. If that becomes like more of a mainstay thing, I will include it, in a later video. But basically, when you're playing more of the mid one, you want to go for this Night Rain facet, and people have been going this in the offlane as well. It is pretty good where it makes the first 5 minutes, it makes that night, so you're a little bit stronger in the early part of the laning phase. But personally, I think for most of your pubs, you're going to want to go Blinding Void because this just makes you scale up better and in the fights, and when you're ganking, having that not shared vision is always going to be really, really good. And I think that's just great for this hero, and you're not going to have as big of a trouble in the lane, in most MMRs. So I think picking this is a little bit of a waste for the most part. But otherwise, the fact that you have these 2 things to consider is very good. And then this hero just dominates the game once you do get to your 6 and once you do have your Dark Ascension up. Supports just can't deal with you. And even a lot of cores, especially if you do go Blinding Void, it's very hard for them to deal with you too. Like, unless they have Force Staff or some other way to get out from underneath your silence and your damage, or they have BKB, but that doesn't happen till like 25, minutes or whatever. It's so difficult for heroes to deal with you when you have your ult. Obviously, you have this downtime where it's daytime or you don't have your ult, and you do need to be careful, but a lot of times in pubs, people just aren't really adjusting for that, and so that's why this hero can just absolutely take over games. You can literally solo carry games with this hero because you're kind of like a carry from the offlane, but you're doing right-click damage, you're going in, but you're an initiator, you're kind of a stunner, you're kind of you're a silencer, you control people, but the biggest thing too is giving vision. Vision is one of those things that, especially in pubs, you know, your supports aren't laying down vision. You're not fighting under vision. It's very annoying sometimes when you just take stupid fights and nobody knows where any of the teammates are coming from. This hero just solves that completely. And now every single fight that you're in, your team and you know where everybody is in the fight because you have flying vision, you're running around, and you see literally everything. I think that is one of the biggest reasons that this hero is so good. And I guess just also to say, the passive is pretty good, and the shard is also good for just like regenning and farming. So, you know, there's not much else to say about that, but I think overall the hero is really good. And then Enigma, people are finally figuring out that this hero is decent from the offlane. It's not really as much of a support as it's been sometimes in the past. It's more of just an offlane with the way that the summoning works now. You're pretty much only going to play this as an offlane. And I don't think there's really anything crazy to say about the hero. You can build auras, and you can build blink, BKB, refresher. The big thing is that it's decent at pushing. It's decent in the lane. That is pretty much the requirement for Enigma to be good, and that is where it's at right now. So as long as this hero can have a good, like, effective lane and early game where it's not just completely useless, then this hero is always going to be good because late game is just a beast. I mean, you can never count out Black Hole, and then Refresher Black Hole is like basically the best late game thing of any spell or any combo or anything in the game. It's just the best. I mean, maybe you could say Chronosphere, but like even that has some counters. You have like swap, you have Oracle saves, you have like certain things to do, and that is similar to Black Hole, but like Black Hole is just so much better with the stun and the damage, and it's just amazing. Like it's so good. It's very hard to deal with, and that is what makes this hero good, honestly. Whenever you can get to that timing, whenever you can have a decent impact in the early lane, in the laning stage, and survive it and get your items, this hero is going to be good. And that's just the long and short of it, honestly. And then lastly, we have Visage, and this is more of just like, you're kind of spammy, you're like annoying hero that only a few people play because there's micro involved, and if you're a specialist you can be really good. It's kind of that cheese hero that I would say is probably the best cheese hero from the offlane right now. Soul Assumption does insane damage. It was nerfed a little bit with this death toll facet, I think, in the last patch, but it wasn't enough to make it completely dead. I think you do have this little awkward timing, maybe like mid-game where you're not the best hero, but if you can take advantage of that by pushing towers, or you can kind of just get your item timings, late game you're very good. And even mid-game, if you are kind of playing tempo with your team, I just think that a lot of times in pubs, especially lower MMR pubs, that doesn't really happen very much, so you just kind of are relegated to farming, and you're like, your familiars can die pretty quickly. You can also die without a bunch of items. It's just you want to snowball that early game and you want to snowball the lane, and you usually can do that every game if you know what you're doing, but then there's this weird break period where like your team probably isn't playing around your strengths, and so that's the only thing you need to be wary of. But other than that, you're going to be like stomping the game, stomping the lane, giving the carry a bad time, you know, destroying team fights if you guys are taking them correctly. And then later in the game, once you do get your items, you are a beast. You can split push if you need to in a losing game, all that kind of stuff. Then moving on to A tier, these are all like normal heroes that you would play in the offlane. I feel like, you know, Dawnbreaker is the best hero. Then like the second best hero is Night Stalker in terms of offlanes. And then you have these kind of cheesy-ish different types of heroes that are not exactly the normal, typical offlaner in Enigma and Visage. And then all these heroes are pretty much definitely viable to be picked in the offlane role. Tidehunter is a little bit better now because they did buff this hero. Also, I think people are underrating the shard on the hero. That anchor is very good against a lot of heroes, a lot of mobility heroes. This thing just destroys them, and so that's really good. Also, the tankiness is just through the roof with the hero. The hero feels like it doesn't die anymore. I think that little buff just allowed the hero to kind of feel overwhelmingly frontline-ish, where you don't have to rely heavily on just jumping in and ulting. You can be this kind of very hard to deal with frontliner that does some damage and is very annoying without having to rely on blink initiation or blink counter initiation, which basically I think the rule with Tidehunter is if you are just solely relying on ulting people, you're not going to be a good hero. If you can do other things and you don't have to just blink ult and you can like be tanky, be frontlining, you know, have a threat for damage yourself, that is going to be something that you're going to consider the hero to be good then. I think that's where this hero's at. Also, I didn't put this hero as a carry. I didn't include it in the carry list, but just be wary of the hero being potentially a carry. I would say it's a little bit of a grief to maybe play the carry version of the hero from the offlane. If you didn't know, you can pick this, I think it's this one, yeah. Tidehunter grows larger and gains extra bonuses per level. So he starts out small and then he gets bigger. And you can actually pick this and play this as a carry. But for the most part, people are going this one for the damage block. And that's the offlane build, but you can potentially go this hero as a carry. Look out for that in the future. I didn't include it in the list. Maybe it's going to happen, you know, in another patch or something like that. I think it's semi-viable, and it's sort of semi-viable even as an offlane, but it's a little bit half grief. I mean, maybe you can get away with it depending on the bracket or whatever. So just letting you know that is a thing. Then Axe. This hero's been nerfed a few times since it was really, really good, probably S tier, you know, maybe 4 months ago or so. It's still very good. Does all the same things. You still buy Blade Mail, Blink, all that kind of stuff. You're still very hard to deal with. You still have a BKB piercing stun. There's really nothing new and different. It's just not as crazy tanky as it was with the one-man army. It's just not as insanely good. But it does all those same things. Still very, very good. Still buying BKB, buying Shivas, buying Ags, buying AC if you want instead of Shivas. There's still all those same things that you do. You just delete people that do a lot of right-click damage if you get a call and Blade Mail off on them. So it's a very good counter to a lot of different heroes, and that's why it's also pretty good this patch. Then we have Legion. Kind of the same thing that Legion has done for a while since they changed the hero to, you know, swap what the two abilities do, where the one gives you attack speed and you can cast it now during your ultimate. I think it's just kind of been around this A-B tier since they did that change, and it's no different now. It's still pretty good. The shield is great in the lane still. It's not as overpowered as it was when it was first introduced, but you can just actually be useful in the game now and dominate the game and, you know, always be a threat to get pickoffs. I think that's really the big thing with the hero is you're kind of like a Ricky or one of these other like pickoff heroes like a Nyx, where you basically force the enemy to 5-man. They have to be extremely careful to split push, and it's really, really annoying to play against a Legion commander because you feel like you can never go out on the map because she's always just potentially there going to kill you. And so that's the biggest thing with the hero. And then you can actually scale up into the later portion of the game and be a right-click hero and not just be this weird bot that just, you know, uses your dispel sometimes, which is what happened to the hero in the past. Then next we have Mars, and this is one of those heroes that it's kind of like Pudge, where it feels like people pick this hero no matter how good or bad it is. It's just that sometimes its win rate is so bad that it deserves being put in like C or D tier. But right now, it's being picked a lot, and its win rate is decent. And that's because the new facet from a few months ago when they introduced them makes it so that when you cast Arena, allies cannot see in the arena if they're outside the arena. That's great for pretty much any hero that is going to save anybody in the arena. So there's a lot of very good supports right now that are good at saving or good at healing, good at really protecting allies from the backline, but Mars like hard counters that. So the only way to really see into the arena is if someone in the arena manages to get BKB off or something like that, and then they can run out of the arena, and that can help. But, or, you know, you put a ward down in the arena, but that's a little bit of a waste of a ward. So it's a little bit awkward in that way for the enemy to deal with this arena. And so it does all the same things it always used to. You know, great team fight initiation, decent damage. You eventually get the shard. You can spear 2 people, all that kind of stuff. Maybe buy Yules to catch out a Puck or whoever else that's a big mobility hero. All those same things, but just that added benefit of kind of countering any kind of support counterplay. And that's really the main reason that Mars is pretty good right now. Then next we have Mag. And Mag is one of these heroes that he kind of just does the same thing he's always done. I know I've been saying that about a few of these heroes, and that's just kind of true because there's nothing super new or special about a bunch of them. At least, I mean, some of these heroes have been changed recently, but Mag, there's nothing crazy. I mean, the facet that he got, reverse polarity, is just a meme. It's actually really bad. I think it's just that most people are realizing, like kind of these other heroes that I'm going to mention in a bit, this hero can farm extremely quickly, can farm stacks. Empowering yourself is very, very good. And then once you get your items, once you get your blink and you get some of these other items, RP is just something that you can't count out. It's kind of similar to Black Hole. I mean, RP might be right up there with Black Hole. Like I was saying, there's no other ultimate late game that is as good as Enigma. I mean, RP might be that. It's actually that good. And you can do a lot of damage yourself. You can actually get more of like these carry items yourself if you're able to afford them. If you have a good game, your laning stage is decent. The Ags is not that bad. It's not great, but it's not that bad. It's pretty good. You have all these different methods and routes to go. You can just go for the straight initiation, you know, going with the shard, going with Yules, going with all these things just to get pickoffs, or you can go more into the damage, you know, playing for yourself a little bit more, and that's also possible and definitely viable with this hero. Also, you know, empowering a teammate, empowering a carry or a mid is never going to be bad. That's always going to be decent, even though it's not the focus of the hero like it maybe was, you know, 5-10 years ago, whatever. So right now, just a decent hero, I think mainly because of the ult and the way it can play, having a good laning stage. Then we have Beastmaster, a hero that was probably S tier before, now is nerfed. still does all the same things. You can still, pick either facet. You can still go for the Ags. You can still go for, the Helm of the Overlord. It's probably more of an Ags builder, I would say, these days now, because with the drums is pretty much that's how you're going to be playing it. But still farms ancient stacks really quickly because you have those 2 ancient camps that you can stack with your board. That's kind of what the hero does and why it's so good. And you can get off to this insane start where you just have more net worth than anyone else, push down towers extremely quickly, and just very, very hard to deal with. And you can almost solo carry the game as a Beastmaster if you know what you're doing and you're very good at getting that farm early and making those stacks. Same thing with Bristleback. This hero was nerfed a little bit, but it's still great. It plays basically carry from the offlane without really griefing because you are so tanky. You can just take over the game. If you do get to your item timings, you will just win the game. It's just kind of that simple. Unless somebody has, unless there's a Viper or some good break on the team that can deal with you. It's just so hard to deal with a Bristleback who has like 4 or 5 items. And you can just go straight Ags, and you are a menace when you go straight Ags. You have that burst damage. You would delete supports. You're very, very difficult to deal with. I think the really only counter to the hero, or the only difficult part of the hero, is early on in the lane, he's not the best. People are just going to be buying stick against you. But if you know what you're doing, if you can kind of strategically use your abilities and you have a decent support, you can still own lanes as well. So that's Bristleback. Timbersaw, decent hero as well from the offlane right now. This hero is kind of like Bristleback, where just can be super tanky, hard to deal with, does insane amounts of damage. If you know what you're doing, if you can play the hero correctly, if you can get to your items in your farm, you will delete heroes you will own. But you can see games where Timbersaw just falls off, doesn't do anything, feels really bad. It's very much, I think, a high skill hero. Not as much as Bristleback. Bristleback is a less high skill hero. It's a little bit simpler to play. This hero, I think, is more complicated. The combos that you have to pull off aren't the hardest, but just knowing your limits, how far to go in, when you're tanky, when you're hard to kill, snowballing the game, that can be something that is difficult and harder to know how to do it on Timber. But if you do specialize in the hero, if you spam the hero, if you know what you're doing, you can literally 1v5 games with this hero. And that feels like a lot of these heroes are that way, these tankier, like farm heavy, difficult to deal with heroes. If you know what you're doing and you specialize in them, you will own the game. It's just that sometimes they can really fall flat and feel really bad in the wrong hands. And that's kind of, there's no like super reliable way to play them, in the sense that, I mean, Mag has an RP, which is reliable, but these guys just don't have the most reliable thing where it's like, okay, this is super straightforward. I just click this one button and it's over. Yes, Beastmaster has a roar, but it's not the best. Like, you have to actually know your positioning, know your farming patterns, know when to go in, know how to do damage, know who to target, all that kind of stuff. Doom is kind of the opposite. You just farm on the hero and you click Doom. That's kind of really the long and short of it. The only thing you really need to know is which creeps are good in the lane to steal, and experiment with that. Look at what pros are doing. There's like, the Purge creep, the Mana Burn creep, the mana with mana regen and stuff like that. There's the Stomp one from the Centaur. There's all the different things you can get, the Magic Resistance one. It's just about matchups and what to do in those situations. But otherwise, it's just good because Doom is now really good with the regen part of it. In the past, people kind of thought that was a nerf. And I don't know if they intended it to be a nerf or just kind of changing how it worked, where now you can use items, but you don't get regen. That's just really good against a lot of these heroes like Alchemist, or like any kind of tanky hero like a Bristleback who's buying Bloodstone. You just really hard counter a lot of these healing supports, a lot of these tanky healing offlaners, like even Timbersaw gets a lot of healing. Any of these heroes that just rely on tankiness, or any of the supports like Abaddon, like Oracle, that just want to be saving allies and want to heal them, it just really, really hard counters them. And so that's really good for this. That's why Doom's really good right now. Then we have TB, who's more of like a spammy kind of cheese hero, but it's a very good offlaner right now. I mean, technically, maybe you would say this hero deserves to be S tier. I don't know. I think it doesn't deserve to be like S tier cheese. I think it's just a little bit overrated, but it is pretty good. You have a really good laning stage. Your reflection is insane because of the facet that kind of makes you use your health and to spawn your illusions, and then you actually have the zeal, which gives you more regen. You can go right into pipe, and then you're like never low health, which is kind of why this hero works and as an offlaner, is because you can go straight into pipe and you use that kind of regen facet ability to just constantly be very high health, even if you are low health. That's really what makes the hero work in this sense. And then you just go straight from pipe into more carry type items. And then you also have a save, which is great. You have a survivability tool in your ultimate, or a save for your allies, and that's great too. So you have this kind of pseudo save / pseudo, utility in the hero, and that's why you also buy pipe, because it gives you that more utility. But then you can go into carry, and this hero just feels bad as a carry, because if you're all in on going carry Terrorblade, it feels like, yes, you can own some games if you're just like a smurfing or something, but for the most part it feels underwhelming. So that's why this hero, just not having to rely on it as the carry with the damage, can be very, very good. And it's also a little bit of a bait, because people can't really ignore you because you do significant damage in the fights. But if they go all in on you, that's kind of what you want, because you're really tanky and you're hard to deal with. And then they're not spending those spells and that time dealing with the other heroes in the game that are more important. Then we have Lycan. This hero just kind of runs around, kills people, more of a cheese hero. I guess it's sort of like Beastmaster in this way. It's just that the wolves are really annoying to deal with in the one facet, and they just own supports, and that's really why the hero's good right now. And you do significant right damage. You're kind of playing carry from the offlane. It's probably one of the best carry from the offlanes right now. Bristleback, Timbersaw, Lycan, I would say carry from the offlane. Even Beastmaster, you could say carry from the offlane in a way. I guess, honestly, a lot of them. Legion even, maybe Magnus even. But this guy doesn't have any like big team fight ultimate. It's just like running around doing tons of damage. And then lastly, as another sort of pseudo-cheese hero, we have Phoenix. I think this hero's pretty good right now. Just as an offlaner, it's a little bit awkward because you want to get a bunch of your items. You can have kind of bad matchups in the lane. Your level 1 ultimate isn't the best. You're going to die a lot with that. You just kind of use it to finish people off or to go in when someone has very low HP. But people often underestimate how much damage this hero does, and it really, really melts tanky heroes, which are very popular right now. So that's why this hero is really, really good. If you know what you're doing, if you want to spam Phoenix, if you want to get good and become a Phoenix expert, this is kind of the time to do that, because Phoenix is on the upswing in terms of pickability and win rate and all that kind of stuff. I think it's a pretty good hero right now. Then we have B tier. These heroes are just kind of like typical fine off lanes, nothing crazy. You know, Centaur, he's gotten some nerfs recently, so he's fine. He still is tanky. He still does a decent amount of damage. It's just not overwhelming like it used to be. It's not the best like it used to be. He has some counters. He's just not like, you know, as good as some of these other heroes. You'd probably rather have some of these other heroes. I'm not a huge fan of Centaur. He just feels like he gets really tanky and then everyone just ignores him. So that's kind of why you need to get like your Shivas, your Shard. You need to get to this point where you're actually doing a lot of damage and you're not just like this tanky guy that does nothing and they can ignore you. Then Primal Beast. Again, another really tanky guy that has low cooldowns, can fight a lot, but it's just underwhelming compared to some of these other heroes that can farm faster, that can do more like, you know, more damage, like axe piercing BKB and stuff like that. I get that Primal Beast has a good ultimate there, but you'd rather almost have an axe calling multiple people, doing more damage with the blade mail, all that kind of stuff. Sand King has been falling off with the nerfs recently, but still decent. You know, I mentioned the same thing on the mid-tier list. The AoE's been nerfed, I think. The amount that the Sandstorm is up, like when you're picking the one that follows you around, like if that's a free Radiance, that's not as good anymore. You're still maybe going to go Bloodstone. So people are going more for the Invis, but it's just not as good. So they nerfed a bunch of numbers on the hero, which makes it not amazing. It's still decent, still pickable, but not amazing like it was. Pango, just the problem with this hero off lane is always that your laning stage can be hit or miss. You can have lanes where you're actually pretty good. You're like harassing the enemy. It's very annoying to deal with. You can have lanes where you just absolutely get stomped. There's nothing you can do, and you're just kind of zoned out of the lane, and it's really, really hard to deal with. And that's the main problem with the hero. But if you can get to your items, if you can get through the lane, if you can have a decent game overall, I think this hero really owns and has obviously amazing team fight and insane damage, and is really, really great. Then we have Slardar. I think this is kind of like an underrated pick right now. I don't see it very much, but when it is picked, if you know what you're doing, you can actually solo carry the game. I think it's kind of like a right clicker, like a carry from the off lane, but you do give that utility where you're blink stunning people and you're running people down and you are frontlining in a way. It just helps with all the things that you want to do, like roshing. You give minus armor, that's great. You give vision for a lot of these invis heroes that are annoying to deal with, that are good this patch, a lot of these invis supports. So in that way, I think that's why it's pretty decent right now overall, even though I feel like it's not getting picked a ton. Then Venge is just middle of the road. I actually don't love the hero, but the win rate and pick rate's okay, so that's why I'm putting it here. It's just a little bit awkward because the hero likes to die, which is very weird. And as an offlaner, as a core, you almost would rather have this on a support as someone that just wants to die, but the benefit is, as an offlaner, you do get your farm and you get that ags quickly, so wanting to die is a lot easier. I think it's very matchup dependent, where if you can frontline, if you don't melt, if it's harder to deal with your illusion, like it's harder to kill you twice and you can just go in, use all your abilities, catch someone out, then, you know, die, feed, and then use all your abilities again, all that kind of stuff. If you can afford to do that, and you can get to your item timings and have a good lane, I think it's very good. Sometimes, though, it feels like even when you get ags, you just melt, and then your illusion melts too, and that can feel really bad. Then we have Brewmaster, more of like a specialist hero. If you know what you're doing, you can play Brewmaster. I'd say it's probably worse than like a specialist hero like Timbersaw. So it's okay. You know, there are matchups where it's pretty bad, where the Brewlings just die, but there are matchups where you can just absolutely stomp the lane, stomp the game, and just feel very hard to deal with. Then Earthshaker, I think it's a very good hero. I really like the hero. It's cool to watch. It's an entertaining hero. It's fun to play. It's just from the off lane, you're not going to be reliable in the lane as much. You're going to be spamming your spells, giving the enemy a lot of stick charges. They can harass you from range if there's a range carry. There's a lot of things that can be hard to deal with. But if you have a good lane matchup, if you know what you're doing, you can actually end up snowballing the lane and dealing with the enemy, especially if it's a melee carry that you can right-click with your totem. You can actually stomp the lane, and from there you can have a great game. It's just sometimes that doesn't happen. It feels like, okay, now I have a support or Earthshaker because the offlane Earthshaker isn't as reliable. Mid, on the other hand, it's probably better because of the way, you know, that TA splashing works, like I mentioned in the other video, and you're more reliably going to be getting your items, and that's why it's probably better at the mid lane. But if you can play it off lane and you do have a good game, it is pretty much just as good. It's just that, like I said, sometimes you're going to be support Earthshaker because your lane just sucked, and now you have nothing but a blink at like 20 minutes because it was just a terrible game. Then we have Viper, just a slow hero, but can be very good against certain lane matchups and just stomp the lane, and then also has a good break for like Spectre and some of these other heroes later. But it just has this awkward point in the mid game where you're just not doing much, you're not initiating, you hope to like group up with your team and push and, you know, take advantage of your timings and stuff like that, but that's not always going to happen. So you're sort of just playing carry from the off lane in this way that can feel a little bit awkward and sort of grief the game, kind of. But I think it definitely is viable and can work in a lot of games. Then we have Brood, just like a cheese pick that's not the best cheese pick, but definitely is viable, especially with Earthshaker and some of these other heroes that can clear through all the spiders these days. That's why it's not as good, but it is decent, has a good lane, and if you do pick it in the right game, you can literally 1v5. Then for C tier, these heroes are sort of viable, but they're not the best. We have Marcy. She feels like okay in almost every position, but not the best. Like, you're kind of just going all in for this like right-click hero that, yeah, you can initiate and blow people up with your ult, but sometimes it doesn't feel like you really do that much, or people can deal with you, you know, lock you down, or the ult doesn't really cut through everything, but then some games you can snowball out of control. It's kind of an all-or-nothing hero in that way. Kunkka is all in for the control, but unlike a lot of these other heroes, it doesn't do that much damage. Like, you're not going for the damage build usually, and so a lot of these other heroes have control, but then they also have damage. Like, comparing the Kunkka to the Dawnbreaker, like, you just a million times rather have the control of the Dawnbreaker, which is a little bit less than the Kunkka, but then the damage is just like insane, and the ability to spam spells is insane, where Kunkka is very cooldown dependent. Then we have Underlord, kind of an awkward hero. This hero is like really weird. People thought it was good, we're picking it a bunch, but then it kind of just fell off without much nerfs. I mean, I think it did get nerfed the one patch, but it just is really, really weird. It's kind of like an aura builder where you can just spam a bunch of auras. It's good against certain matchups, but then sometimes it just feels really bad. And especially in pubs, I feel like it's not good because you have to coordinate with your ultimate around like what the team is doing. And again, if you compare it to something like Dawnbreaker, where, yes, you can play Underlord across the map, well, Dawnbreaker literally saves teammates and then can just like teleport basically to the fight really quickly. This is kind of awkward because you have to place down the thing and then you have to like travel through it, and it's just super weird and not as fast and not as like counter initiation as you want it to be. I think basically if you could place the ultimate and then travel in it like in a second, it would maybe be broken, but that would kind of make the hero actually good and easier to coordinate with your team. Right now, it feels really awkward. Then Bounty, more of a support, but can be played as an offlane. It just kind of all or nothing in the matchup ways that some of these other heroes are. Sort of like an Earthshaker in the sense that, not in the way you play it all, but just in the sense that like, if you get your items, you can actually snowball and be very good, but sometimes you can feel like you're just a support and then you kind of ruin the game because of that. And then Necro, the problem with this hero offlane is that you want it to be like this mid, you want to get Radiance, you want to get these like farming items, these like Boots of Travel, Radiance, that kind of stuff. You don't want to be going for pipe, really. You don't want to be going for these small items that are kind of annoying to get, because you want to go for that just like late game timing of when you get your 4 items, you are unkillable and you do insane damage. And it's just more awkward to go that on the offlane version of this hero, because then you're kind of griefing the game and you're not really doing anything. You're not initiating, you're not like pushing, you're just farming, and that's kind of grief. There's other heroes here that can farm and do all that other stuff too and have good late game timings. Then we have DP. I don't know, it's weird. Where does this hero fit? Hard to say. It's kind of on the upswing. That's why it's C tier. It's okay. It's not the best though. Again, I think, like I said in the mid tier list, it's one buff away from being broken. I think it's maybe a little bit underrated right now. We'll have to see. It's just awkward. Like, what really are you doing? What are you going for? What is the item build? You know, what are your timings? I think that's something people don't really know as much with the hero because it's just not being played that much. It's not that great. Then we have Razor. This is just carry from the off lane, but if you have a good lane, which you can stomp a lot of lanes, and you can push, and if you just do want to farm, you're going to be a carry, and you can just win the game. I mean, it's really just that simple. Like I said, it's kind of a grief. Like, at least Viper has, you know, a break, and really definitely dominates the lane, and can push towers with the shard pretty easily. Razor sort of does that, but it's just like, no, I'm just playing carry. But for whatever reason, because it's been popular in pros as an offlane sometimes, at least you can play this and not get yelled at or get reported. So that's like the benefit of the hero. Then we have Pudge. I think this hero is just a better support right now overall. Does all the Pudge things. It just, as a core, it doesn't feel as strong as it once did. You know, with this like tanky build that you're going where you're unkillable, like Bristleback's just going to be better at that. Then Darkseer. Middle of the road, okay. I mean, I guess if you're a Darkseer player, you can play it. I hate the hero, obviously, in general, so I never really recommend playing the hero. There's not really great illusion, you know, heroes right now, I guess. I mean, I think it maybe was better in the last patch when you could make illusions of heroes and stuff, but even then, I feel like it wasn't good. It's just awkward. When is Darkseer really great? I don't know. It's hard to say. I just hate the hero in general, so I don't have much to say about it other than I don't like the hero, don't play it. Then Kez. This hero is probably more of a mid, definitely mostly a carry, but you could play it off lane. I don't know what the off lane build is. That seems a little bit awkward. Maybe you just go for like Echo Saber or something. I don't know. Maybe you go, you know, Deso really quickly. It just feels, maybe Mage Slayer even. I don't know. The build is a little bit awkward. That's why it's in C tier. I think it could end up being an off lane in some ways because it is so dynamic in this way. It's just that they have to find the right build that isn't a grief, that you're not going like full squishy, you know, glass cannon mode. And that's kind of what this hero does now from the carry and from the mid. So if you can figure out a way to make it work with a different build, I think it can work right now. Otherwise, you're just kind of going like a Razor or other things like this, carry from the off lane. Then D tier, the last of the viable heroes. DK is just more of a carry. This hero off lane just feels awkward. Yeah, you can buy Blink and maybe like Orchid or, you know, BKB and maybe even S and Y. It just feels awkward because you're going to be going for that cleave talent, and that's a farming talent, and you're kind of griefing in that way. Then CK, even though I feel like this hero is probably more of an off lane in these days, it's just not as good. Similar to Wraith King, it just doesn't feel that great. Like, I think because these heroes specifically, and even Tiny too, there's better strength heroes that do more damage, farm quicker. Like, all these guys up here just do what these guys do as kind of like carrying from the off lane, but they just do it better, and they're not griefing the game necessarily. Like, they have better stuns, they have better farm, they have better right clicks even a lot of times. And that's the big problem with these heroes. And then Tiny, I mean, like, Tiny is similar in this way, but like, you have this one combo you're relying on. And like, wouldn't you rather have, you know, the Bristleback combo or like the Timbersaw combo or like the Blink Initiation that you're using to do pure damage rather than just like Blink Toss and Avalanche? Like, it's just not that great. Then Wind Ranger, I guess it's sort of viable, but not really. I mean, you're not like full griefing to pick it, but it is almost, it's bordering on F tier grief, to be honest. Then Venom's kind of weird. It's just like more of a support, very squishy. I guess you want farm, but honestly, it's more of like a jungler. Like, it's the only jungler in the game these days. I'll talk maybe more about that in the support tier list, but yeah, it's just not great. Tusk, you could get away with it. It's just more of a support right now. Same thing with Winter Wyvern, kind of in the same category as Wind Ranger. You could definitely, you know, pick it in some games, but it's just more of a support. Spirit Breaker, also more of a support, has trouble farming waves ever since the nerf where you don't really clear the waves as easily in one shot with a charge. It can still work for sure. You can definitely pick it, but it's just not as good. And then Abaddon, just, again, more of a support, but does have times where you can pick this hero as an off lane and kind of play this like right click carry frontliner, very difficult to deal with kind of hero. It just can be awkward at times and is more of a support. Then lastly, we have F tier, and these heroes just like aren't off lanes really. I mean, Alchemist, people try it, don't do it, that's grief. This is more of a support, so it doesn't really play off lane right now. Lone Druid, just not a, you know, off laner. I guess you could play it, but you're just going all in for that carry. It's just really, really bad. Nature's Prophet feels awkward in general as a hero right now, I think, but I think its worst role might be off lane. Like, I think it's either more of a support or like a carry, to be honest. Then Nyx, just pick this as a 4. don't pick it as an offlane. Like, it hasn't been, I almost want to delete it as offlane because it's kind of grief to pick that as offlane. And then Clockwork, I've seen it work sometimes. Like, people can pick this hero and have a decent game with it. It's just, what does it really do as a 3 that it doesn't do as a 4 or 5? And that's the big deal. And that's kind of like a lot of these heroes are either just way better in another position or kind of griefing if you pick them out of that position. So that's why I put Clock here. I mean, you could maybe say it's a D tier. I don't know. I would listen to that, but it's just like, why even pick this hero? Just play 4 if you're going to pick this hero. And then lastly, before I end, you might say, wait, what is this? Like, up here, this looks like a hero called Slark. And yes, it is. To reveal what this hero is, I'm going to show you now. Slark offlane. So hear me out here. This hero is actually maybe an offlaner. Now, I know it's kind of weird. It seems like it's grief, and maybe it is, sort of. But the reason why, and I'll explain that to you, and I've seen people play this as an offlaner recently, is because they're going for this Dark Reef Renegade. So if you didn't know, basically, now that you have this passive, which used to be on the ultimate, basically, this is the thing that gives you the regen and the move speed, and it lets you know when you see wards. And this can be really, really good because you can basically de-ward wards early on in the game. That's not something an offlaner does as much, but it's still really good to know when you're under vision, you know, during the rune fight or even just like in the lane in general. If they have the cliff warded, that's great. But the biggest thing that this does for the offlane Slark is that you actually get this 10 health regen per second when the enemy doesn't see you. And then with this, it lingers for a little bit when you do end up appearing back in the lane. So basically what you can do is you can actually use this to your advantage to have insane amounts of regen for most of the lane, and you're very, very difficult to deal with and to harass down, because basically you have alt level 1, like the old alt level 1. Now, you don't have the same amount of move speed and regen, but you have a version of that that allows you to sustain in lane to a degree that I think a lot of people, it catches them off guard. They don't really realize that this hero was regenning that much. And so you can buy like 2 sets of tangos and that's all you need, and you will be full health throughout most lanes. Now, this hero does have counters. So a lot of like a drow, for instance, this hero is going to be destroyed by drow. So a lot of these ranged heroes will destroy this hero. But the, melee carries are coming back into popularity. And there are like melee supports that sometimes you will go against, or supports that you can jump in on and kill. So there are matchup dependent situations where this hero can be really good. So hear me out with that one. You might put it in D tier. If I was going to put it in, I would put it here maybe. It's not the best, but look out for it because people might start picking it, and it isn't like full grief. You can actually get away with it, and some games you can actually stomp with it. So that's why I'm including it in here. Plus, it's one of my favorite heroes, if not my favorite hero. So, so that's why I kind of put it in here, because it is kind of one of those things that's happening in the meta that's like a shift. So be aware of that. Kind of similar to like Tide carry and stuff like that. So anyway, that is the end of the tier list. Just wanted to mention that lastly because that was an interesting thing that's been developing in the meta. So thanks everybody for watching. If you like the video, like, comment, subscribe, all of those kinds of things. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.